Yes lads, Harry here. Hope you're all doing super well. In today's video, I'm going to be presenting to you 10 tips I think will help you along on your Sorare journey. Whether you're a beginner, whether you've never heard of Sorare before, but you're interested in learning a little bit more about it, I hope this video will do you well, and I hope you take some value from it. If you are completely new to Sorare and you are yet to sign up, there's a link in the description of this video, which will get you £20 worth of free credits once you've purchased your first 5 cards from the new card auctions. I've also started a members section to my YouTube channel, which is growing incredibly fast, by the way. So massive thanks to all of you guys who have already joined. I build lineups for you guys. I will give you a gallery review once a month. There's members only scouting sessions and a private Discord where you can ask me anything Sorare related, all for £1 a week or £4 a month. That is the intro out of the way, lads. Let's get into the video. Okay, so the first tip we're going to discuss is the importance of captaining the right card in a lineup. On screen now, we can see our under 23 rare plus lineup from this weekend. We finished 10th, which is an unbelievable finish. But that's all thanks basically to Vinicius Jr. and the fact that we captained him. Now, I don't ever, as another rule which will add on to this 10, I never really captain goalkeepers. People do, but I don't really tend to like doing so. Even though Costa scored unbelievably well in this game week, I don't like captaining goalkeepers personally. But for this case study, it was basically out of me captaining Pedri or Vinicius Jr. for this upcoming weekend. I ended up going with Vinicius Jr. because of his form, because he is able to score goals and get assists, win penalties, etc. Not saying Pedri can't do that, but over the last few games, Vinicius Jr. has showed me that he's in good form. Pedri, this was his first game back. He was expected to start. He did start. He scored pretty well. He got a decent all-around score, 27.8. But Vinicius Jr. not only got a 25.3 all-round score, he also scored 2 goals, which accumulated to 95.3 points. Now, if I were to captain Pedri, I think our bonus would have been something like 62.8 times 1.2. Now, the 1.2 is because of the captaincy bonus, which gives you 20% extra on your score. So he would have basically got us, what's that? 62 minus... So he would have got us 12.56 extra points on our score. Whereas Vinicius, who scored 95.3, as we captained him, would have got us an extra 19.06 points. So there was like a 7-point gap between, if we would have captained Pedri compared to captaining Vinny. Now, if we did captain Pedri and not Vinny, we would have lost out on those 7 points. And that would have basically meant that we wouldn't have won a tier 1. We were only 7.13 points within the tier 1 prize pool. Only 5th to 13th get tier 1. So we would have finished in the tier 2. So, the difference between, captaining either or player is a different tier in that sense as far as, what you're going to win. Sometimes it can be the difference between no card and a card reward. So I think captaining, the card that you expect to score highest is what you want to do, obviously. Now, getting that right isn't easy. Like I said, there was underlying reasons why I picked Vinny, form, Pedri's first game back, etc., etc. It's not always that black and white as far as, your lineup goes and who to captain. But in this case, Vinny was the clear favourite for me. And thankfully, I was proved right. The second tip I have for you guys is eliminating DMPs. Now, what is a DMP? DMP is an abbreviation for did not play in the Sorare world, which basically means your player did not play. He didn't start the game. He might not even played the game at all. Now, I think this tip becomes really important if you're playing the cap 240, whether that's at limited, rare, super rare level, wherever it is, you basically need all 5 of your guys to play, right? To give yourself a chance of winning the threshold. You need to score 280 points or more to win the Ethereum payout. So I won the £40 threshold this weekend after scoring 36 points over the threshold. Now, if Nacho, for whatever reason, didn't play, or Ivan Heel, any of our players, bar Nishikawa, who only scored 32 points, then we wouldn't have won the threshold. And to go a bit more in depth on this, I tend to use Play Sharper a lot of the time to predict or to foresee if a player is going to play or not. Now, let's say last weekend, right, we had Liverpool at home to Brentford, and we own a Nathan Collins card, this guy here, and we also own a Varane card. Now, Varane, according to the Play Sharper expert, which is just a super fan of United, basically, predicting or trying to predict the United lineup, he gave Varane a 50% chance of starting, okay? Whereas the Brentford expert has given Nathan Collins an 85%. It's clear that, Nathan Collins away to Liverpool isn't a great matchup. Brentford are probably going to get beat, and they did. They lost 3-0 in the end. We're saying this, after the fact. And, Man U at home to Luton is a very good matchup. if Varane plays. But he's 50-50. Like, we don't know if he's going to play or not. It's not as nailed on as the 95% of Nathan Collins. So in the case of, wanting to hit the threshold, I think the best option is to go with the Nathan Collins because he is 95% on to play compared to the 50-50. And long and behold, Maguire and Lindelof were the centre-back pairing for that game against Luton, which they won 1-0, but Varane didn't play. So you would have got 0 points out of that. Whereas, if you played Nathan Collins, he actually played against Liverpool. He didn't score that well, but at least he scored points. So basically what I'm getting at is always go for the safer option if you have the choice. Like, if you didn't own a Nathan Collins and you only own Varane as a defender, then, you're kind of stuck with only playing Varane. But if you have 2 options and one's Nathan Collins and one's Varane, for this specific game week, looking at the information we have, Nathan Collins is the play, even though the matchup isn't as good, because he is just more nailed on to start. The third tip we're going to discuss is the importance of research when it comes to building lineups on Sorare. Now, on Sorare itself, there's some great information of cards. You can see, for example, this Enzo Fernandez. We can see every game, since he sort of started playing professional football, how well he scored, on the Sorare matrix, which is great. We can also see his price right now. This is at the limited level. And then, outside of that, there's not really too much the Sorare can offer us as far as, do we know if Enzo's going to play this upcoming weekend? So Enzo actually plays for Argentina this midweek, and there's no real way of knowing if he's going to play or not. There's no lineup projections on Sorare itself, and that is kind of why you need to use a third-party website to help you with that. So if you go over to the lineup builder, it tells us that Enzo has a game, but there's nothing to indicate here to us that he's going to start this game. Common sense would probably say that Enzo will start this game, judging off his most recent games and the amount of times he's started for Argentina. But, there's nothing to say here that he will or he won't. Sorry, it does have this nice little thing sometimes. It tells us if there is an injury to a potential player. So, for example, here, it tells us that our player that we just inputted into the lineup, Evandro Sanchez, is actually injured. So, they do give you certain warnings. It says here, potential injury, hamstring since the 12th of October. So, it will come up and tell you sometimes if an injury is alerted on a player. But you're going to probably have to go to Play Sharper and have a look at the expert picks over there to see if, they think Enzo Fernandez is going to start this game against Uruguay. So as you can see here, we've got Enzo Fernandez down at 80%. So, this guy isn't picking the Argentinian team. But, if a player is at 80% on Play Sharper, there's a good chance that he's going to start, right? There's no guarantees. Nothing's guaranteed in life, especially in football. But this is a good way of indicating that Enzo's going to start. We can also go over to Sorare Data, which is a tool that, you probably cannot play Sorare without Sorare Data, if I'm being honest. And that's not me being paid to say that. That's just basically a fact, or definitely a very strong opinion. So on Sorare Data, he's down at 61%. There's been 70 projections from community members. 61% think he's going to start, 39% think he's going to be on the bench. And if we go over to the predicted 11 of the Uruguay-Argentina game, they've got Martinez, Alvarez, Messi, De Paul, Molina, McAllister, and they've got Enzo in here. I mean, he's not going to play at the back. This is a little bit muddled up in that sense. But, the formation's right. It's just, Enzo's not in the right place. But, we can't control that. Combining Sorare Data and combining Play Sharper to come up with an educated guess to making sure your players do not DMP. The fourth tip is buying cards during the off-season should normally result in you getting a lower price than you would if you bought him in season. Now, my case study for that is New England Revolution captain Carlos Heel, who plays in the MLS. Now, down here, we're looking at the 6-month graph of his price for the rare card. And as you can see, in sort of, from May to June, his price was at like 760, even more than that, 860 here. He got up to about £900 at peak price. And at the time, the MLS is in full swing. The MLS starts normally from February to the end of the year. So this was like 2 months into the season, right? Now the MLS is done and New England are out of the playoffs. We can see his most recent price was £387. Before that, 421, 427, 443. Now, of course, there is other factors to consider here. It's not just a case of he's just more expensive in season than he is out of season, because form, injuries, etc. can affect this. But as a blanket statement, usually if you're buying a card that doesn't have any games coming for the next few months because their season is done, he'll usually be at a lower price than he would be in season. Like I said, that won't apply for every single card, but most cards that should be the case. And as this graph shows, there is definitely a correlation between, being able to play a Carlos Gil in season with loads of games left compared to the end of the season where he's not playing for the next 3 months. So buying him right now won't give you any utility, but you're getting him at a very low price to where if you were to buy him closer to the season starting, I'd like to think he would be going for more than £387. That is all opinion. Don't take this as financial advice, but that would be my educated guess. The fifth tip to consider is always be careful when you're buying a card that has had an incredible run of form out of nowhere. So for example, we're going to use Santiago Colombato as our case study. Now, if we look at his recent scores, we can see over the last 5 games, he's come into some incredible form. 2 assists, some really good AA scores, 3 dark green scores out of 5 games, which is very, very interesting. Compared to the previous 5 games where he got some okay scores, 10 AA, 17 AA, 19 AA, 11 AA, 4 all-round score, but nothing incredible, right? Now, don't get me wrong, there's always other variables to take into consideration. You could argue he was adapting to a new league, and it's going to take more than the first 5 games to maybe, get into full flow, and I completely agree with that, and I'm not saying that these scores won't continue, because they very well might. But what I'm saying is, you are going to be paying a price for that, right? If we look at his price graph over the last month, you can see he was comfortably going for like 40 odd pounds, right? Even a bit less, 33 pounds here. Now, these last recent sales of 62, 61, and 59 are 50% more expensive than he was before, he started scoring very, very well, over these last 5 games. What I'm getting at is, if you were to buy him now at, let's say, 60 odd pounds, just be wary that if he does get a few barred games in there, his price might then come down a little bit. Now, you don't need to go sell that card, of course. If you don't want to sell and you want to keep him for the season, definitely do that. But what I'm getting at is, don't expect his price to just continue rising game after game, because he's already had a 50% price increase. This card can't just keep going. He's not going to get to £1,000. His cap is a certain price, and I'm not saying he's reached that cap, but a 50% increase over 5 games is definitely a big enough jump to where he probably is trending towards his cap in that sense. Tip number 6, and probably one of the most important of this video, lads, is patience. Be patient with your cards. Be patient with your lineups. My example for that rings truer than ever with this under 23 limited lineup, lads. So on my channel, if you don't know, I do a Road to Glory under 23 version where basically I have £100 to spend on a set of cards, and I'm trying to win as many cards as I can, which I will be giving away to you guys at the end of the season. Now, I've been doing this series for 13 weeks, and I have not yet won a single card from this under 23 limited division. This weekend, on my 14th try, was my first reward. I finished 401st out of God knows how many people, like 5,000, 6,000 users, I believe, and I've won a tier 4. It's my first reward. Now, I'm not saying that card's going to be worth £100 and I've made back my £100 capital that I've spent on this gallery. I just had to believe in my cards and give them time. It's not going to work every week. You're not going to win every single week unless you have the best of the best cards. And even then, it's not that easy. Trust me. Sorare as a game is complex, lads. It's not easy to understand. It took me months to understand the matrix, how players score points, how to line up my cards in the most optimal way. The list goes on. There's so many facets to Sorare. It's incredible. And that is why it's such an incredible game, because it is very complex. It's not that straightforward. But to be really good at this game, it does take quite a bit of skill and also an incredible amount of luck. And of course, you need capital. You need to be able to put money into this game, no matter what level you want to play at. Limited, rare, super rare, unique, whatever it is. Back to the example, if we would have sold one of these cards or maybe 2 or 3 of these cards and swapped them for somebody else, but all I know is I stuck to my guns. I believed in the strategy that I was implementing. I was buying good cards. I just weren't able to line them up in one cohesive lineup until this game week, and it's happened. You have to be patient. Okay, for tip number 7, be careful when you're buying cards that have multiple positions. So, for example, we've got Thorgan Hazard, who now plays for Anderlecht, and his cards on Sorare have forward cards and midfielder cards. And if you're completely new to Sorare, you're probably thinking, what does that mean? Like, what's the difference? Why does that matter? Well, if we go over to Sorare data and have a look at his most recent scores, okay? These are his scores as a midfielder. We can toggle that then to a forward. And as you can see, his scores are just not as good. You know, this most recent game, he would have scored 69.7 as a forward. If we change that back to midfielder, he scores 81. And that's basically because he wins a load of tackles, which forward cards on Sorare don't get given. Like, you don't get the 3 points for winning a tackle, but you do as a midfielder. So Thorgan Hazard's midfielder cards are, of course, going to get those 3 points for the tackles won and increase his all-around score. And so if you are out there buying cards, just make sure that the player doesn't have multiple positions. And if it does have multiple positions, there might be a price discrepancy on the midfielder to forward version. Right now, there isn't a forward card on sale, so it's hard for me to give you an exact example with Hazard because only midfielders are out there. But if we have a look down here, like, these cards look exactly the same, but one is a forward, as you can see here. And if we go back, one is a midfielder, and those cards will score differently. The midfielder right now is the better scoring card, so you probably won his midfielder card right now. That won't always ring true with every example. Sometimes the forward card is better to have than the midfielder because the player might give away the ball a lot, and as a midfielder, you lose more points for giving away the ball than you do a forward. So there is loads of different elements to consider, but just be careful when you're buying cards with multiple positions. Okay, tip number 8. Form for any player in football, whether that's goalkeeper, defender, midfielder, or forward, is important. But I think as a forward, I think it's more important than any other position. Now on Sorare, getting your forward pick right of your lineup isn't easy. And I think using the form of a card is more important sometimes than the matchup itself. And my case study for this is 2 cards that I own myself in the Super F form, and that is Thistalinga and Luis Duke Lopez. Now, my contemplation most weeks is, who should I play up front? Do I play Thistalinga or do I play Duke Lopez? Now, for example, right, Kilmarnock at home or Hearts at home are 2, good matchups for Duke. I'm not going to probably play him in those matchups unless he's on really good form. And that only rings true for me as a forward. I'm not as worried about the form of my defenders, my midfielders, as much as I am my forwards. Like, you look at him since the start of this season, he's not scored that many goals. He's had 3 goals so far. Where if you look at Dalinga, he's scored almost 10 goals. You're probably thinking, well, yeah, obviously you would play Dalinga. But, in some of these games, like, he's played Liverpool twice and scored twice, once at Anfield. Like, as you can see, they lost 5-1. But he ended up scoring that 1 goal, which is, obviously really, really important. Whereas Duke might have been playing somebody really easy at home, but, he didn't score. As you can see here, 3 home games in a row. Okay, he didn't start this one here, but no goals. Where, Dalinga did score. So, and I'm not saying the only reason he did score is because of form, but I do consider form being an important factor in picking my forwards. And that's not to say Duke's form won't change. He scored 2 goals in the last 3. Before that, he hadn't scored in 5 games. So, his form might change and that would be great. And he then would become more of a favourable pick for me. But right now, it doesn't really matter what matchup. This Dalinga is showing me that he's in such incredible form. He can score anywhere, away from home, away at Anfield, at home, to whoever. It doesn't really matter, right? Which is obviously a luxury to have. Not every forward is going to be in that, fortunate position. But when I'm picking forwards in my lineups, I always tend to go with the most informed player, not necessarily how good the matchup is. Whereas for midfielders, defenders, and definitely goalkeepers, I tend to go with the better matchup, if that makes sense. Tip number 9 is always try to plan ahead. So you don't want to be in a situation where you don't have enough players to line up in a lineup, because otherwise those players are going to go to waste. Sorare Data's lineup builder helps with that incredibly. You can plan ahead. We're currently in game week 224, right? Which is November 14th to 17th. You can plan ahead all the way till January. So we can have a look in January in game week 442. And we can see, what cards we have available. So as I can see here, I don't have any goalkeepers playing, which is, not a great place to be if I want to be playing in this specific game week. It does look like the African Cup of Nations is on around this time. So, if I want to play and I want to compete, I'm probably going to try and need to get a goalie in there, And if I am looking to get a goalie for the African Cup of Nations, for example, to play in this lineup, then, buying him now will probably mean he'll be cheaper now than he will just before the African Cup of Nations, because FOMO will kick in, prices will increase, people will demand more for those cards because it's much closer to the African Cup of Nations, and so you're going to be paying a premium for that. If you plan ahead, you tend to get better deals, you tend to buy cards when they're less in demand, and you're just going to get them cheaper. It's as simple as that. The 10th and final tip of this video is don't be afraid to research and go digging in some of the less popular leagues in the world, i.e., outside of the top 5 major leagues, because there is some incredible value to be had. My case study for that is this Owen Beck super rare that I picked up. Now, I do have some background knowledge on this because, I am Welsh. I do follow Welsh football. I am sort of tapped in to the best sort of Welsh talents. So that does, of course, help. I'm no Scottish League expert in that sense. But what I'm getting at is don't be afraid to go out and do some research and buy cards from some of these obscure leagues that you wouldn't necessarily think have incredible scorers in. Now, you look at his scores since the start of the season, they have been absolutely insane. Like we look down here, back-to-back 50 plus AA, which is honestly ridiculous. Like it puts him into one of the best under 23 defender options there is right now. 25 AA, 37 AA, 29, 36, 20 AA with an assist. A clearance off the line, 3 AA. The first 2 games were a bit dodgy, don't get me wrong, minus 8 AA, minus 13 AA. But since then, he has been absolutely insane. Like they lost 5-0 to Rangers. He still just managed to get a positive all-around score. It's not a good score, but the fact that he conceded 5 goals as a defender and still managed to come out with a positive AA is insane. Now, you look at his price. I paid £425 for this super rare card. Now, if you want to get a card that scores as well as him, as an under 23 super rare defender, you're looking at £800 minimum, and they will come from, better leagues in that sense. Right, lads, we're on Sorare data in the player rankings for the top 10 under 23 defenders, okay? I want to show you the super rare values of some of these cards. So as you can see down here, Owen Beck, the card I picked up for £425, okay? He has an L15 of 60.2, which is, the equivalent to Antonio Silva, for example, okay? He doesn't play in the top 5 leagues. He plays in Portugal, but he's, a Portuguese starter. He's one of the best sort of centre-backs for his age. Don't get me wrong. Like, he's an incredible scorer. But look at the last sale, lads. Nearly £3,000 for the super rare. I paid 1/5 of that for this Owen Beck card. Basically because nobody's ever heard of Owen Beck, Antonio Silva is a big name in the sort of Wonder Kids, sort of sphere. And that's kind of why, his price is up, the price it is. Like, I'm not saying £3,000 isn't the correct price for him in that sense. But what I'm getting at is you can find some good value. And it doesn't even have to be at super rare level. It can be at limited, rare. My case study is just at super rare because that is one of the scarcities I play most. And so don't be afraid to shop in some of the less fashionable leagues because there is some incredible value to be had. Right, lads, I hope you enjoyed that top 10 video. It took me a little while to make, to be honest. So if you could leave a like on the video, that would be massively appreciated. I hope it does help you along on your Sorare journeys, whether you're a beginner. I do hope you've taken some sort of value from that video. I hope you have a great day. I hope you have a great game week, and I shall see you guys in the next video.